Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Doc here in the studio with Linkup, and we're Doc, and we have in our studio a very special guest, very special guest. Long overdue um, arrangements that we were trying to make to have her on our station, and here she is finally, Dr. Enolia Foti, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I don't know if the F is silent or what, but I'm doing
No,
my
you
best.
did pronounce that correct. It's
I
Dr.
did.
Enolia Foti. Thank you.
All right, great. It's good to have you here with us. And just let our listeners know that we are broadcasting on four stations at the same time: WCAN Radio Global, WCAN Radio Africa, Caribbean Connect, and what's the next one? I Can Talks, WCAN Radio India, and Caribbean Connect. So that's five of them. So we have five stations tuning in right now. So hopefully we get some numbers on. I know you did your homework in getting your people to listen on to the station so they have further choice. All right, so let's get right into it. It is my privilege and honor to have you here with us. And we hope that as these discussions go on, you will learn so much more about the son like such a talented woman. I know that in our previous private conversation, you piqued my interest when you started talking about some stuff. Like, I gotta have her on the station. Gotta have her on the station. Yeah, gotta have her on the station. Very interesting. So let's go right back there. Let's start off right there. Let's deal with the fun part, and then we get into the actual business and what you do. But before we do all that, just say a little bit about yourself to our listeners.
So, my name is Dr. Enolia Foti. I was born and raised in New York City, in Queens, Bayside. So, I'm a native New Yorker. I went to school at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, majored in mathematics, and then eventually went on to get my master's in business and awarded two honorary doctorates, one for humanities and one for peace. Um, it's been a journey, and right now I reside in Angola, in
Hmm.
Africa. And so when I say that it's been a journey, many interesting things have happened that landed me here in Angola. But I have to share with you that I've always had a love of travel, and I've always had a love of culture. And so everything else, you're going to have to ask me the question and I'll unveil as it comes.
That's fair enough. Definitely fair enough. You said something very interesting there. Let's get into that. I'm gonna ask you like this: was it a born New Yorker? What are you doing in Angola? Tell us about that journey. You know, a lot of interesting things have happened. What is a New Yorker, born and bred, doing in Angola? How did you get there?
So, this New Yorker, born and raised, lived a fast life and realized that life needed to shift. And then, in discovering that shift, I thought it would just be upstate New York and living a little bit of a slower life. But when God has a journey for you and you surrender to it, then all of the wants and the loves and the things you think you wanted to do, they take place. And that's what happened to me. And it didn't happen to me early in life, it happened to me later in life. And if anybody ever would have told me that I'd be here in Africa, I'd laugh at them and say, not the city girl. Not the way that I love, the city and the plays and the this and the that and the other, born and raised in New York City, and had a sister who went to Juilliard, so I was exposed to the entertainment industry, and I had a degree in mathematics, and I was exposed to the scientific industry, so I had a great love of both, which is like an anomaly, because usually you're an artist or you're a scientist or have a scientific like mind. And I'm a little bit of both. So I've always been that anomaly.
Hmm. Still mysterious. Let's spill the beans a little more. Let's get into it. So you always have this drive for more to either make changes or slow down, or you didn't think it was upstate New York where it's going to be a little slower. So what happened? What happened?
So
Trying to bridge
here
the
I
gap
am.
between all of that and where you are.
Yeah. So here I am doing the corporate job, doing what I was taught to do, and I work for a Fortune 500 company in telecommunications, and I design computer networks for a living. And I was going to climb the corporate ladder, and then about 10 years, 15 years into a 20-year career, I had this longing in my heart. I was like, there's got to be another way to live because I wasn't happy. I got a peek in the box with the big boys, and I realized that the big boys were ugly and I didn't like them. And why am I in a role that aspires to be like people I don't even like? And in that longing to be a shift, I knew that I was African, and I knew that I had a little Native American background in my bloodline and in my lineage, Cherokee actually. And I was like, okay, I want to learn about my African history. And there was nobody that looked like me that I could find to work with me or to teach me. So, but there was Native teachers. There was Native Americans around me. So I ended up going to a conference and I met my first Ojibwe Native American grandmother. She wasn't Native American, she was actually Native Canadian. And I found the gall and the courage to approach her and say, will you teach me? Will you teach me? And I didn't know what to ask her, so I said, will you teach me about herbalism? But all I knew is that I wanted to be in the presence of this person, this woman. She was there with her beautiful long white gray hair and holding a serpent staff and her buckskin dress, and she was just magnificent the way that she looked. And she said, well, my girl, if you're really serious about wanting to be taught, here's my information. Come see me sometimes. And I was like, are you serious? Because I will come. And she's like, I wouldn't have extended the invitation if I wasn't serious. And 2 months later, I found myself northern Canada, 20 hours away from where I lived in New York, and a meeting with her and spent the weekend with her, and we got along beautifully. And she's like, well, if you're really serious about teaching, come to my retreat. And so she said, but you can help plan it, and you can be a part of it, and I'll teach you if you bring some people. Well, I brought 22 women because I was going to make sure that I got taught. I was like, bring a retreat, that's easy. I can do this. And I did. And that forged a lifelong friendship and relationship. And I thought that that was going to be it, but it wasn't. Because after that retreat and the beginning of that relationship, I started meeting all these indigenous elders. I met grandmother Shirley of the Lakota, and she worked with me. And I met Grandfather Lynch Archuleta of the Yaqui Indians in the Arizona area, and he worked with me. And then I met the Hopi, and I learned from them. And then I traveled to New Zealand, and I met the Waitaha. So each time I met these elders, it took me to a different location in a different place in a different journey.
Hmm.
I met the grandmother Luz Clara, and it was Luz Clara who basically that I met. She's of the Mapuche in Chile. That basically said to me, "You need to go home." And I said, "Go home where? Go home to New York?" And she said, "No, you need to go home to Africa." I said, "Go home to Africa?" She said, "You need to go home to where people look like you and are beautiful like you. You need to go home." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'll go home and I'll bring my husband." She said, "No, you need to go on a pilgrimage." And I said, "Pilgrimage, but I don't know anything about Africa." And she's like, "But you need to go home." So I said, "Okay." She's like, "I need to go and I need to go by myself." And I'm like, "Okay." So I was in Chile in a women's retreat, and we went off on our own at the top of the Andean mountains, and we spent time alone, and I'm talking to God. And I basically said to God, "Okay, God, if you really want me to go home to Africa, I will go. But you have to show me a way because I have no idea how to get there. I don't know anything about Africa. You have to show me a way. And we got called off the mountain by a drum to come back in because everybody was off on their own at the top of the mountain. We came back in from this women's retreat. I got there a little bit early because I had finished my prayers and everything. And the retreat coordinator, this woman named Marcela Lobos, was sitting there talking to somebody, her friend Lorraine, and said, "Yeah, my friend David wants me to go to Africa, but I don't feel called to go to Africa. Lorraine, do you want to go?" And she's like, "I don't want to go to Africa. I'm from Philippines. I'm from a third world country. I don't want to go. But I know Enolia wants to go." And this was 5 minutes after I had this conversation with God. And she turned around to me 5 minutes later and said, "Do you want to go in my place to
Right.
a safari in Africa?" And I was like, "Yes." And it worked out. And I went on a 100-mile walk across Kenya, the East and West Savo parks. First time I ever laid foot in Africa, and I was with 6 other spiritual, beautiful people, but I didn't have to be with them
Okay.
because
Okay.
we were just associates. We just met, so I had my pilgrimage, and God provided it, and that's how it
Now,
started.
now we
That's
get into
it.
the meat of the thing. Now we know how you got there. All right. So let's dig a little bit more. What was that like? Comparison,
I have
New
to
York,
tell you,
Canada.
it was powerful. It was powerful to be in Kenya. It was powerful to be led by 7 Maasai leaders and the retreat coordinators, a gentleman named Alex, but 7 Maasai leaders. And the number one leader is this 6'7" man named Muhammad. And they were my brothers. They were my brothers. We would walk for 10 miles during the day, get up at 6, eat breakfast, walk for 10 miles. And then the people who were in charge of the camp would literally pick the camp up and move it 10 miles forward like a hotel, like a moving hotel. Put it back down, put camp back down. And when we came into camp and we walked across the river back into camp, everything was set up for us so that we could go, shower, rest, eat, and everything we needed to do. And the first 3 days, I was worried about, am I strong enough? Am I fit enough? Do I have enough water? And it was a 10-day walk, 10 miles a day, 10 days. And after the first 3 days, then I realized that I was in this symbiotic relationship with nature, with the other animals. People are always fearful. We walked 10 feet away from pods of hippopotamus. We saw a cheetah take down a alligator. We saw, rhinos that hadn't been seen in 20 years. We saw so many elephants. And I didn't know that the male elephant is a bachelor by himself, and the females shun him after they have their children. And then we saw the elephants at dusk crossing the rivers, crossing an alligator infested river, and we sang, and the Maasai guarded us, and we made noise across the river so that the alligators would go away. All of
Wow.
the things that I was afraid of, no longer afraid of. There it was. I was on the motherland and going to sleep with the monkeys playing and cawing and hearing a lion roar in the background. It was the most amazing thing I've ever done. Amazing. And we did it all by foot. We walked 10 miles every day.
Never walked that much in your life.
Never.
In New York, you would quicker take a bus, right? Like 10 miles?
Uh-huh. Absolutely. And like, what, this city girl and that kind of nature? No, 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 no. You couldn't have paid me. But then, when God calls and has you do something that isn't your norm, and you know that you're supposed to do it. I knew that I was supposed to do it when that grandmother talked to me and told me I needed to go. And I had talked and made a commitment to God that if you show me a way, I will do it. And I had to keep my commitment. I had to keep my commitment.
All
So
right.
I have to tell you that after that, I couldn't work in an office anymore. Couldn't do it.
Well, coming right back, we're gonna definitely talk about that and what this whole journey, what changes it brought about in you, and we're coming back to do that. All right. Okay, so stay right there.
Heart Talk Between Sisters radio broadcast. Tune in to a heartwarming and enlightening radio experience like no other. Join us on a journey of love, laughter, and lifelong connections as we explore the unique bond between sisters. Our broadcast is a celebration of sisterhood, offering a safe space for candid conversations, shared memories, and inspiring stories that touch the soul. Whether you're a sister yourself or simply appreciate the beauty of this extraordinary relationship, this broadcast is for you. Discover the secrets of sisterly love, support, and understanding as we delve into personal experiences and heart-to-heart conversations that will make you smile, cry, and reflect. So, grab your favorite cup of tea, get cozy, and let our Heart Talk Between Sisters broadcast warm your heart and lift your spirits. Join us every week for an emotional journey filled with wisdom, connection, and the enduring power of sisterly bonds. Don't miss out on this extraordinary experience.
To listen to our station WCAN Radio for this and other informative programs all day long, visit www.wcanradio.us. To be a special guest in any of our segments or to support us financially through sponsorship, call 1-868-397-5961 or 1-678-856-3709.
Okay, and we're back, and we are here on Linkup with Doc, a conversation with, some just about anybody, business people, people who have amazing experiences. And we're certainly privileged today to talk to Dr. Enolia Foti, telling us about her story and her journey from New York, Canada, and now she is in Angola. I cannot even imagine what it's like to be in Africa. Never set foot there yet. I'm planning to at some point in time to get there because it's just something I feel I have to do eventually. And I think the opportunity is going to come for me to do that. 10 miles a day, every day, for 10 days, you said?
Yes, for 10 days. And then what I found out, so here's the irony of it, is that when I was planning on going on this trip, I was like, okay, I might as well find out what my African heritage was. So I took a DNA test.
Okay.
And what I found out was that on my mother's side, she was Kenyan, Luya tribe. And on my father's side, he was a mix, but majority Nigerian. And so when I found out that I was part Kenyan, it was almost like this safari was like the motherland calling me home.
Hmm. Wow.
And when I would talk with the workers, they were all of various different tribes. So needless to say, there are many tribes across Kenya. And one of them, some of them were Luya. And so my Luya brothers told me what it was like to be Luya and how it was living there, and that my people were farmers and drummers, and the singing across the fields, and they could grow anything. And so learning about myself and learning about my mother's side was phenomenal. It's something that I'll never forget. And when the journey was over and I sat in that corporate desk, well, that was Monday, and by Friday I had left. I couldn't do it
Wait,
anymore.
let's back over a bit.
Oh, yeah.
You went back to the United States, right?
Yes,
You went back,
yes,
and you got there to work on a Monday, and by Friday, you left.
I left.
Back to Kenya or Angola?
I left the corporate world.
You left the
That's
corporate
what I
world.
mean by I left. I left the corporate world. It was time. There was this song in my heart, and I say this to all of you who are working those 9 to 5 jobs and you're ignoring the calling in your heart. That I ignored it and ignored it and ignored it. And what my realization that I came to when I walked those 100 miles is that the corporate life was killing me. My health wasn't good. I hadn't been in nature in I don't know how long. I had monkey mind, meaning that my mind was always racing until I finally had clarity. And that's what the walk brought me. It brought me clarity. I had clarity like I never had before. I
I have
had
lived
a peace.
I have lived in the
Huh?
United States for many years, and I
Yeah.
know, especially for Black Americans, going outside is not something they enjoy. They're always talking about the bugs and the flies and the insects and all that kind of stuff. And here you are
Yeah.
transitioning from something that you've grown accustomed to, a real city girl, and now it's like, I had enough of all of this. I can't do this anymore. And you left.
And I knew. You know why? Because Africa had another rhythm. The earth, the way things went about doing and getting done, it was another rhythm. And I got to walk in that rhythm. And I got to be at peace with that rhythm and fall in line with it. And it wasn't about cutthroat. It wasn't about doing things fast and productive. It wasn't about having anything thrown back in my face because it might not have been done correctly or to somebody else's expectation or judgment. I saw a peek on how life could be, and I loved what I saw. And I saw it through my grandmother elder upstate Canada during that retreat. That was the start of it. How life could have a different rhythm and that I could enjoy that rhythm and that I could be a part of that rhythm. But it finalized itself in me on that walk across Kenya. And then that's when I knew I couldn't go back to that life. That wasn't my life anymore.
So are you saying that it was an easy adjustment for you between making that decision,
I'm
facing that
saying,
decision, facing
I,
that decision?
I guess I'm saying that I realized that there was more to life than the materialism that I was addicted to in terms
Mhm.
of what the corporate life was bringing me. Because materialism and money can be addiction if you are doing things that you feel aren't in integrity.
Mm.
You know, and it's not that I didn't feel like I was doing in integrity, but I was getting to a station in the corporate world where integrity was what could have been compromised. And I had choices. And so I made mine. I made my choice.
How many years now?
So I say that with all conviction because a lot of times we feel trapped. And we feel trapped because we're making this great money, we're living a certain lifestyle, and we're like, oh, I can't compromise that. So what do? We give our lives. And when I say we give our lives, the sheer stress can kill you. Because I also had health issues when leaving. And I was like, I had to make me the priority. I needed to be the priority, not the job. And in making me the priority, something had to give. And it was going to be either me or continue working. I think what also rocked me was that one of our corporate executives, he was an executive VP, died at the age of 50 years old, had a heart attack and just died. And you know what they said about him? They said, oh, he never really knew his family. He just worked, worked, worked. And then after a week, they forgot about him. So here's a man who died, working, gave up his family, gave up everything, and they talked about him for about a week, and then they forgot him. And this is what we're giving up our lives for? No,
Mm.
no.
So how many years are you in Africa now?
I've been in Africa for only 3 years. I've been visiting Africa across 8 years. And in Angola is like a base, but I've had the great fortune of seeing South Africa, Egypt, Cape Verde, Mauritius, Kenya, of course, because that's where the walk took place, Senegal, and Morocco. And I'm still visiting, I'm still exploring, I'm still learning. But what happens is that when you're here, then what becomes appealing to you as a vacation is different than what you hear about when you're in the States, when you're in the United States, because you only hear about what we talk about in the United States. But when you hear, the people are like, oh, I went to the Canary Islands the other day, or oh, I went here, and you're like, whoa, that's off my chart. I never would have thought to go there, and you explore and you do more. And it's wonderful to meet. There isn't a person I've met here that doesn't speak more than less than one language. I mean, less than two languages. At minimum, 2 languages, 3 languages, 4 languages. We are such an intelligent people with such phenomenal experiences and such breadth of culture and breadth of sight and breadth of abilities in order to do things and accomplish things. And it just blew my mind to learn from the Sangomas of South Africa, to be initiated as Ovumbundu here in Angola, because I was presented to my fiance's tribe, and I was initiated through the Ovumbundu, and greeting them by saying, Kala Lechiwa, and it's like a song. And that's another thing. Everybody in Africa has a song, they're singing. They don't care whether they have a fantastic voice or if they're tone deaf, but everybody's down, walking up and down the street singing, and everyone's tolerant of everyone else. No one says, oh, please stop singing. No. They just listen to the song.
I wish everyone could have been seeing you right now, to see the glow on your face and that big smile. You could become an ambassador for Africa, because you're selling this thing really good.
Hey, it fills my heart. It just, my heart overflows, It does. And I wish that other people could feel what I'm feeling, because the joy that it brings to my heart, and the amazing people that I meet. And it's common for me to pick up 3 or 4 numbers when I walk out the door, because people are just like, oh, you're so nice, you're so amazing, can we exchange phone numbers? Can I just speak with you? Yes, you can. And we exchange numbers, and they call. Hi, how are you? And they text, I hope you're having a beautiful day. Do you remember me? I'm the one who met on the bus, or the one you met on the train.
I guess you would never do something like that in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember visiting New York. On the train, I kind of wasn't too sure about which step I'd get off, being a new person in New York, So I approached this guy on the train just to say, hey, I'm trying to get off at this stop. Could you help me when I get to the stop to tell me this is where you get off? And he looked at me and said, I don't know you. Why are you talking to me? I'm like, okay. It's a different culture. And wow. So let's make a little switch right about here. Let's talk a little bit on your professional self.
So my professional self. So for 20 years of my life, I designed computer networks. And I worked in every aspect of information technology, from the manufacturing floor all the way to the corporate and the parent. I've traveled across the world implementing networks. I implemented, when I worked for a dealership prior to my corporate life, I implemented the top 10 networks that were in the industry. And then in my corporate life, I took care of the company's network. So I came on as a senior analyst, and I actually ended up running the very team that I came on as a senior analyst with. And I worked with them for 20 years. And when I left corporate and I decided that I was going to shift and change my life, I took what I was good at, which is that I was good at mentoring. I was good at speaking. And instead of going, I'm going to find another job, what I did is I looked at the aspects and the qualities of life that I liked. And I listed all of the characteristics of what I loved. And then you know what? I created a job that I wanted to do, something that I loved, because I did what I was responsible for, went to school for 20 plus years. So it was time for me to do what I loved. I am an orator. I am a motivator and an inspirer of people. And so I wanted to do retreats. I wanted to be able to inspire and work with people who felt the same way that I did in the most beautiful of places around the world. And so what I did is when I got to California, I started my own business. And at that time, because of my beautiful Ojibwe grandmother elder in northern Canada, I learned how to make drums. I also dove in with meeting these elders to learn shamanic practitioner. And I knew energy work. And so what I would do is I would call my closest friends, and I was like, if you could sponsor me for a workshop. It was like 10 of my closest friends. Will you sponsor me? Let me come. Let me do a drumming workshop. Let me teach, et cetera, et cetera. And so here I was with this blend of like indigenous teachings in corporate ways. And that ended up being, those 10 people ended up being 22 states and 4 countries later in that year. Because word of mouth would get around that I was doing this work. And they were like, come teach at my house. Come teach over here. And I said, yes. And so I would go, I would teach, and there I was in the Cayman Islands teaching how to create and make your own drum, teaching, you know, how to be a better person, because I ended up developing my master class called Empower, Achieve, Succeed Through Self-Mastery. And why this was an anomaly of a master class is because it was independent of culture, religion, and everything else, right? All of the tools you already possessed were inside of you. I had learned through my journey in working with myself and healing myself from my own traumas and experiences and not wanting to be here, not wanting to do this in life, to creating 7 basic principles that we already possess to look at life differently and to approach life differently and to lay a foundation that you can stand on, whether it's personal or professionally, that served you in your attitude, that served you to grow and to prosper, that just served you in every way. And I learned it because I found the common bond and denominator among all these indigenous people who had it all the time. They had it all the time. But our arrogance, always look at the indigenous with the entitlement eye that basically says, well, I live better than you, so therefore I am better than you. And that's not the case. The case is that they live peacefully. They live at peace. They live without chaos. They live without turmoil and creating drama in their lives. And I found and learned the best of what everybody was doing. And I grasped it. I structured it enough to be able to teach it. And that's what I do. That's what I sponsor as one of the main things that I do. That, along with shifting the energy of how you are and the burdens that you feel like you're carrying, and then helping you to see that you can live a phenomenal life. And it starts in your heart, and the heart leads the head. So that was it. That was the key. And it's so funny because that same indigenous grandmother that started me off, that was willing to teach me, and trust me, I put my arrogant corporate foot in my mouth many times with her, and she showed me compassionate leadership. and what it would look like when something's not thrown back in your face because you made a mistake. And full circle, 12 years later, I ended up being initiated as a grandmother from her and adopting her lineage as my lineage. And so grateful. So grateful.
There's a lot of
So,
conversation. There's a lot of conversation that you hear concerning Africa,
okay.
quality of life, as to the quality of life that you have in the United States, Canada, Europe, and the United Kingdom. And there's always this conversation that the quality of life that you guys experience in America is much better quality. That's why in some cases I hear they call them first world or third world countries, and we all these different jargons. Looking at it from your standpoint, having experienced both of them, tell us something about it.
Have I experienced, I missed the word that you say, have I experienced what?
You have experienced both of them, so make a comparison. Make a comparison based on all the hype and everything that's out there right now. Tell us what you think are
So,
the
okay, so people are always going to share what they perceive, right? But the bottom line is that when we take responsibility for ourselves, then we also take responsibility of the world that we create and that we live in, right? And so if our world is filled with a lot of drama and a lot of harshness and everything else, then we need to step back and see and notice and be aware of how are we thinking? How are we navigating through this? How are we moving through this story? Are we adopting that story as our story? Because it doesn't have to be our story. Remember that each one of us is on a walk and a path through life. And a door opens and a door closes, and a door opens and a door closes. If you can perceive and see that, right? We're walking through life and the door opens, we take a peek in and we go, oh, I'm going to do that. But what is that? Oh, I'm going to do that. You know, is that to our detriment or is that to our upliftment? Right? We always have a choice. That's what free will is about. And if we start closing, if we walk through life and we close the doors of that which doesn't serve us, if we can make the conscious choice of saying, that's not going to serve me, that's going to bring me down the rabbit hole, I'm not doing that. We're automatically shifting our lives because we're not engaging in that which would take us down. And if we understood that we have this control, then we shift our lives automatically, no matter how harsh it is, because we're not jumping in through the door of everything that we know doesn't work for us. And then when we turn those things down, that gives the universe an opportunity to open doors that do work for us. It's a choice. And we have choices. If you make a different decision, then you open up a different opportunity. If you make the same decision, fall into the pattern and say, oh, it's always like this, it's always the status quo, well, you're going to live the status quo. You're going to be that status quo. But the thing about it is that when we make those different choices, many of us are afraid of them. I was. I made a different choice. I came back and I sat at that desk from Kenya and I was looking at this and I was going, I can't do this anymore. But everybody's depending on me to bring this paycheck home. Well, we're going to have to figure it out because I can't do this anymore. Am I going to do this until I die? And then will everybody be happy? And then I would have been a martyr to everyone and they may have been happy. But what about me? This is my life. So we make a choice and we have to make that choice based on ourselves. We have to make that. So I sat my family down and I was like, we're going to have to shift some things because I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do it anymore. It's killing me. And if you don't say something, then What you do is, I always say this saying, dream a beautiful dream or you will get dreamt. You can either live your life being dreamt by fulfilling what everybody perceives you should be doing, or you can fulfill your own dreams by holding a vision for yourself and walking towards that vision. Many of us are being dreamt. We're fulfilling what we're told to do. Where I started off doing that. My mom was like, your sister went into entertainment, you're going into something more stable. You're going to math and science, you're going to get a job this way. This is the direction you're going. And I said, yes, Mom. Yes, Dad. And I did it. And I did it for what? The tune of 20 years before I was brave enough to say, I can't do this anymore. I don't want this. How did I get here? Why am I here?
When we come back, I'm going to ask you two tough questions in closing up. So stay right there.
Celebrate International Women's Day. In honor of International Women's Day, the R network of radio stations, including HTBS Radio, has partnered with 3,500 international retail stores worldwide. Celebrate International Women's Day with us by sharing exciting deals and promotions on your platform today, connecting and commemorating the spirit of the day with your audience. Shop through our special links. Assist us by sharing these exciting saving opportunities while we raise the required funds to finance our global projects. Call us today for more information. Plus 16788563709.
Okay, we're back. Enjoying this conversation because it brings such a different perspective to when you think about Africa. I have a number of friends who live in the United States and they're not doing well. Um, but in a sense, they feel so proud that they're bigger than the big US, right? But I know they're not doing well financially, they're miserable. And then I asked the question, okay, why don't you try something different? Why don't you try? Have you ever thought about going to Africa? Because there's this big cry now to, just like you, for people to return to the motherland and come home and try it out. Take a vacation, see what it's like, do some investments if you can, um, get your DNA checked to see which tribe you came from and all that kind of stuff. And one friend said to me, I don't know anybody there. I don't know anybody in Africa. And I said, well, when you went to America, you didn't know anybody yet. So what's the difference? Why you feel comfortable basically in a white world where you're not appreciated and deep down in your heart, you're not doing well, but you're afraid to go and venture out to go to Africa or some part of Africa and see what it has for you. It may be the best decision in your life. Talk a little bit about that as it relates to not just you. Your journey has been amazing. And when you look at, if you want to call it an investment of your time and everything else, the returns are fantastic. Say something to those that are listening that may be having this silent war inside of them to say, look, go home, just like the lady said to you. Go home. You need to go home. And say something to those who don't think that Africa is their home. And I'm talking about people of African descent who feels that Africa is not their home as well. So talk a little bit about it.
I think that I'm going to define fear. I define fear as a bubble, and we're at the center of the bubble. Okay? And the bubble itself is our boundaries. And we love operating within our boundaries. And as long as we're comfortable with our boundaries, it's fine. But as soon as we go beyond that boundary, we're afraid. And that's what fear is. It's outside of the comfort zone. And what we need to do is that when we want to overcome fear, we need to expand the comfort zone. Well, how do you expand the comfort zone? In this case, you expand it with information and research. There are more Americans moving to Africa than you know. There are pockets of American communities in Ghana, in Kenya, in Tanzania, or Tanzania as they pronounce. And I'm going to tell a story. So here I am in US, and I'm engaged, and he's Angolan, and it's COVID, and he needed to go back. And it had been COVID enough where they finally lifted some of the restrictions enough that we could move around a little bit and we could fly again, but there were still restrictions. And so he needed to go to Angola, deal with his business. He had been away too long, et cetera, and Angola wasn't allowing anybody in. So I couldn't go. And I was like, you're not leaving me here in America. So I packed my bag and I went to the country next door, Namibia. And in Namibia, I found a group of college students, and I lived with college students who were transplants from Angola living in Namibia. And they called me auntie, right? Because here I am, this older woman, living with a group of college students. And I figured out how to function, and I learned. And I was like, hey, I need to do this. And they was like, oh, you go here. Hey, I need to do that. I learned the cab system. I learned where the 3 malls were. I learned how to get around, period. I met their friends. I went with a group of students who were nurses, and we went hiking up in the mountains of Namibia. I met my dear, dear friend who is in her late 20s working for a bank, and we went to Swakopmund, which is at the edge and the coast of it. I went with my new friends. And then when I moved from those students, I lived with Pastor Fidel and his wife, Tasha. Because they needed an extra income, I needed a place to stay, and I met them through church. And I lived with them for 3 months, and I met a whole nother group of other people. And here I am by myself in the middle of Africa, in the middle of Namibia, living, functioning, and my fiance is next door in Angola. And then after 6 months, I was called into Angola for my skill set for being American and being able to teach English as a second language, brought in on a visa, got in. I came with 1 suitcase, and I never turned back. And I never turned back. Now, I visit home. I go back home once a year, and I stay for like a month and a half. But I'm loving where I live. So would you say that I was fearless? No. Would you say that I had to figure it out? Yes. But isn't that what you do if you move from Brooklyn to California? Isn't that the same thing you would do if you move from Tennessee to Michigan and they do things a northern way? Or if you move from Chicago to, I don't know, Alabama or Georgia, and they have a different way of doing things and a different rhythm of doing things? So help me understand how it's any different if they're speaking English. I can understand if they're not speaking English, but if they're speaking English and you can comprehend and communicate. And then the other piece of this is if you do your homework on the economy, anybody knows that the US dollar lasts longer and goes farther in these countries. Do your homework. Find out. You can call the local embassy and find out where expats are, because we register. The embassy knows how many Americans, where the pockets of them are, and can share information with you. Do your homework. We're afraid. The internet has access to every piece of information you want. You could put it in Chat GPT and ask. And see how far your dollar can go. What's the average salary? How much do homes cost? In Angola, do you know what $600, $800 buys you? 6 months of an apartment. 6 months. Do you know that we're paying $800 a month in the US?
I'm
And
not.
for
That's
six
right.
months, you can live in an apartment in Angola. Come on.
6 months.
6 months. They want a 6 months rent up front. So you have to pay $600, $700 on average for a decent apartment, maybe eight. Let's be really, really outrageous, $1,000 for the 6 months.
You're talking about quality here, right?
Yeah, yeah. So what I would say to that person is expand your limited beliefs out to encompass what you're uncomfortable with and figure out what makes it comfortable, and then dare to step into it. Dare to.
Yeah. Time always fly when you're having fun.
Yes.
And I do know that you have another appointment coming up, so you want to kind of bring it to an end here. Your final words to specifically women. I know you're part of Luani. Um, I saw the awards that you got and all that stuff because I'm a part of it as well. So I know some of your sisters are listening as we speak. Your final
Mhm.
words to the women that are listening.
To those women that are listening, the leaders of all nations, you are the mother, you are the goddess, you are the queen. And we are the ripple effect. And as we lead, as we teach, as we share our skill set, as we share our humanity, it just brings me great joy to be a part of people who dare to step into that truth and contribute in such a great and grand way, like yourself, Dr. Green, because you found me. You found my story and speaking with me and dared to give me a platform to be able to share that. And with that, I am so grateful and so honored to be a part of that. So it's just like a shout out to my sisters who are doing this all over the world, who are sharing their gifts all over the world. And I'm honored to be able to share mine. And so if my stories can help and inspire or motivate anyone out there, if my programs can help and uplift someone to help them trust themselves more and to know that they are the gift and that anything that they do is going to be that contribution, then I am grateful and it was all worth doing and all worth being.
Wow, wow, wow. I couldn't say it better. So it's been my pleasure to have you. Trust me when I tell you there's a lot more questions I have for you, but I'll ask that those things as we build a relationship outside of the broadcast because you know because of the different organizations I belong to and our focus being on Africa and all of that. There's some questions I'm going to ask with you at a later date privately. But I do want to thank you so much for your contribution today and for your open, I mean, fun, serious, you name it. Um, you can hear the glow in your voice of a woman that is content and proud of where she's at and the decisions that she's made and how that decision has affected her first and her family and everybody else. So we want to wish you all the best. And we hope this is not going to be the last time because I think you have so much to offer. So much to offer. And we pick you up on some of those at a later date. Thank you very much and God bless.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of the day.
You too. Take care, everyone, and thank you so much for honoring me and allowing me to share. I truly appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Green.
You're welcome.